Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. I'm Alicia, and today we're going to be talking about two books by Tiffany D. Jackson, White Smoke and Allegedly. First of all, I just have to say that Tiffany D. Jackson has very easily become one of my favorite writers. She typically writes young adult thrillers with the exception of her most recent release, White Smoke, which is a horror young adult book. And although it does have psychological thriller elements, it is mostly a horror book. Now, what I really love overall about Tiffany D. Jackson's writing and her storytelling is that she takes a great deal of care in the themes that she is presenting. And a lot of times this is handled with a lot of nuance. It's not just black and white. It's not just right and wrong. There's a lot of little complexities that she takes into account, and I think that is fantastic, especially for young adult books, because young adult readers will go ahead and further develop their critical thinking. They're not just being presented with someone else's ideas, they're being presented with a theme or a topic and then see along that spectrum where they lie and what their thoughts are. So that is just something that I really love about her. I do also want to say that I don't think I've ever given a Tiffany D. Jackson book anything below 4 stars, so everything she has written has either been in the great or the excellent category for me. So let's actually start off talking about Allegedly. So Allegedly was actually Tiffany D. Jackson's debut novel. It is a young adult mystery / psychological thriller with an unreliable narrator. In this one, we're following a small 8-year-old black girl called Mari B. Addison, and she was convicted for killing a 3-month-old baby that was under the care of her grandmother. We know right from the beginning that she was convicted, but we don't really know what the circumstances were or the actual events of that night. We just know that she was convicted, and throughout the entire trial she didn't say a word. Now, it's been years later and Mari has been in the system for a few years. She does end up finding love and becomes pregnant with a child and has dreams of raising this beautiful child. But when they tell her that she doesn't really have a choice on what happens to her unborn baby because she's also underage and they threaten to take this baby away, Mari knows that it's time to speak up and relay the events of what happened that night. And so she starts to do research on how she can overturn her conviction. And that's really all of the plot points that I can really tell you without spoiling anything. When I read this, I was just mind blown. First of all, it was her debut and it was just done so well. The story was so intricately woven. The characters were so rich. Mari was just this beautiful and intricate character and you just wanted to root for her. I did end up actually reading a physical copy from my library, and it had these inserts from newspapers and from psych evaluations that happened during the original trial. So I guess you could say that it is in a mixed media format. Kind of. Most of the story is told in a regular fashion with little inserts breaking up the pages. So it's not all mixed media. Another thing that I really loved about Allegedly, that I also love about White Smoke, and just in general about Tiffany D. Jackson's stories, is that they're powerful stories that often reflect stark realities of individuals. In this one, she's talking about the inadequacies of the justice system, of abuse, of motherhood, the criminalization of black bodies, racism, and powerlessness. And although Jackson doesn't outright come out and say, hey, I'm talking about racism here, or hey, I'm talking about motherhood here, she is weaving these important topics at several points in the story. She does it in a very subtle way. Another thing that I particularly loved in this one, there were little pockets of joy within the story, like when Mari starts to think about her baby and how she's going to take care of it without giving other plot points away. There is a focus also on building strong female relationships and how they're vital for just your well-being. So I really love those little pockets of joy. They were really refreshing. Overall, this book floored me. It was easy to digest. It had great themes. It had a very nuanced, enriched character. It had little pockets of joy. It was just everything that I wanted from a Tiffany D. Jackson book. One thing that I do want to mention is that the pacing was a little bit off for this one. I remember starting it and being really interested. Then during the middle, it started to slow down and I didn't really see where it was going. But then it started again to pick up near the end. So there was just this like a lull period that I had to get through. There was still rich character development in that area, but the plot itself wasn't that fast and it did detract a little bit from the story. So I did place Allegedly into the great category, and I'm so happy that I finally read her debut novel. The next book that I wanted to talk about is White Smoke, and this is actually her newest release, so we're going all the way to the other side of the spectrum. And I would actually say that this is the perfect blend of horror slash psychological thriller. It was so good. We still have all of those rich thematic elements that I love in her stories, and we still have intricate, nuanced characters, but this one also creeped me the hell out. I wasn't afraid of bed bugs until I read White Smoke. Just coming out and warning you already, if you are someone who doesn't like bed bugs, maybe stay away from this book because it creeped me out so much. Like, I can, like, just thinking about it right now, I'm like getting kind of itchy and you know? In White Smoke, we are following a blended family. Marigold and her family have relocated to Cedarville. Her mom is an artist and she acquired this artist residency where basically this foundation allows them to live rent-free in this house. But this house is set in a dilapidated area of the town and there's stories that the house is haunted. But the family doesn't know any of the history of the house and none of them did research into the area or the house before moving there. It was just such a great opportunity to start anew. We have Marigold who was struggling with drug addiction and it just seemed like a perfect opportunity into a brand new start. Or so they hope. But things don't turn out quite as planned when Marigold starts to hear and see things, random objects being moved around the house. Is the house haunted? We don't know. You'll have to read to find out. There's so much more that I want to tell you about the story, so I might end up making a separate spoiler vlog or spoiler video because I really don't want to ruin the experience for other people. There's so many great things about this particular book, so I just want you to go ahead and experience it all on its own. All of the things that I talked about in the beginning of the video that I love about Tiffany D. Jackson's writing and character development and themes is all in here into this one. The themes that are particularly tackled in this book or themes that are interwoven are blended families, drug abuse, again, the criminalization of Black bodies, gentrification, anxiety, not being believed, corporate conspiracies. In terms of pacing, this one is a little bit different than Allegedly. So this one actually starts off very slow and then it really picks up at the end. So if you prefer a more medium paced book, just keep that in mind. It's really slow and then very much just takes off. It's like a roller coaster, right? You're going up and it's like and then you get to a certain point and it's like boop, and then the ride ends in like 2 minutes. That is how I would describe the pacing of this book. So just keep that in mind. In terms of what I didn't like about this book, one is that it was sort of left open-ended, and it's not necessarily that I didn't like it, it's just that I wish we had a sequel, or I wish we had a short story or a novella that has a follow-up, and I do hope that she does write one because we left in a very important part of the story in my opinion, and I can see why she did it that way. If she had ended it any other way, I feel like the story wouldn't have felt believable, or she wouldn't needed an extra 200 pages to write a different ending. So I really do hope that we get a sequel for this, or a novella or a short story or something. So if you're someone that loves books that tie up all the loose ends, this doesn't happen here, so just be prepared for that as well. The second thing that I didn't like about the book, and this particular thing is extremely subjective on our own personal experiences and the way we grew up and see other people, but it was that the characters' ages, in my mind, didn't line up with their actions. They're a lot younger than I expected for the actions that we get from all of them. There's 3 kids in this book. We have Mary, her brother, and then her stepsister. And for me specifically, they just didn't seem like their actions correlated with their age. But again, that's objective to culture and the way you're brought up. You know, certain kids in some cultures had to grow up a lot quicker than others. Actually, the one character that I had a hard time believing was that age was the stepsister. She's this white little girl who isn't that little, or at least not in my mind. I forgot what age she's supposed to be, but she acts like she's like 4 years old. And maybe this is supposed to be indicative of another theme where Black and brown bodies and Black and brown kids are expected to age at a faster rate than white kids. You know, white kids are sheltered and given certain privileges to remain young. So actually, now that I think about it, it might be because of that. Yeah. Anyways, that's something that I wanted to point out. Those were the 2 books that I wanted to talk about today. If you like my channel, please like and subscribe. That would be the best way to support me. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!